Hi, my name is Mike Fish, and I've been in the bus ministry about 34 years.
My name is Caleb Gerber. I'm on 80-7, and I've been in the bus ministry for almost 3.5 years.
My name is Matt Bushy. I have the privilege of being a part of Route 97-2 in Division 2.
My name is Pete Cowling. I've been in the bus ministry for 42 years. Don't plan on quitting.
Been a bus captain in Chicago Heights, Illinois, on bus number 8 for 26 years.
I've been in the ministry, or in the bus ministry, for 13 years of my life now.
Someone asked my oldest son Kevin, when did your father quit the bus ministry? Kevin replied, when they built a 72-passenger car.
I've seen a lot of people's lives changed, and it's just encouraging to see people grow in the Lord. See them picked up, and a lot of times they're bad home life, and yet they still want to grow.
Several of the blessings that I've probably experienced in being in the bus ministry. Number one would be getting to work side by side with my wife. She's been a tremendous help and blessing. We have the greatest workers in the world.
It's a great opportunity to be a part of the bus ministry, to see lives change for Jesus Christ.
Seen many lives change on my route, and it's just been exciting to see people get Faithful Church get baptized and start discipleship.
I wouldn't trade the bus ride. It's the best single tool I've ever found for raising my children and now my grandchildren.
Some of the young people that we've been able to reach are now in City Baptist schools, and they come faithfully every single week. They're out sewing on Saturdays as well, and knocking on doors right alongside of their bus workers.
The man that runs our Spanish bus, 8B, is a man that we reached over 20 years ago in a fall program. He came to help his kids win a prize, and he got saved and been coming to church ever since.
My 4 children are all in full-time service because, in part, they grew up on the bus route. I now have 14 children riding buses to Sunday school every Sunday, some in Arizona, some in Oregon, and some in Indiana. I have 3 of those grandchildren who have already graduated from college and 2 who are currently students here.
And it's one of the biggest blessings to know that right now, even while we're still in Bible college, we're able to lay up treasures in heaven while we're still on earth.
That's always been a huge encouragement to me, I know as well. Especially just to see them grow in the Lord, and then they start impacting other people as well.
And make an impact in their lives, and at the same time they make a huge impact in our lives.
The Bible says a faithful man shall abound with blessings, and I've seen a lot of blessings through the years just being faithful at doing the same task over and over again.
I have bus kids that are missionaries in foreign fields. I have bus kids that have graduated from Hiles Anderson College in full-time service. But the best single reason I have for staying in the bus ministry is it's been a great way to raise my family.
As part of our bus ministry month for this September, every service will have a different testimony given. And I hope as you listen to these testimonies, and there'll be a variety of different ages of people who give their testimony, but I hope that you will appreciate and be glad that you're part of a church that has a bus ministry and is willing to go out and reach people who otherwise would not know Christ. And this morning, Brother Jerry Vargo is going to come and share his testimony.
I am a bus kid. First time I came to this church was 54 years ago. It was October of 1962. The way I started coming to the church was I went to school with a friend of mine whose father was a bus driver here at this church. And they invited me to come to Sunday school, and I started riding the buses. Then he pulled a trick on me one time. I wanted to meet Brother Hiles. I just loved his preaching, and so one Sunday service, after the service, we went over to his office, and I thought he was just going to, let me get to introduce him. And we walked in the office, and my friend said, Brother Hiles, this is my friend Jerry Vargo. He's been riding the buses, and he's not saved. And I looked at him, and I said, what in the world are you doing? But I wasn't, and he knew it. And so Brother Hiles led me to Christ on November 5th, 1967, there in his office after a Sunday evening church service. Then I was riding the bus. I was the oldest child on the bus, and my bus driver started having to work shift work in the steel mill. So Brother Hand used to pick out different drivers to come and drive the bus, and then he said, Jerry, I'm gonna put you in charge of the bus route. I'll send an adult by your home on Saturdays to go out and visit the bus route. And Dr. Cowling's aunt, Mrs. Alma Cowling, would come by my home and pick me up on Saturday morning. We'd go out and visit the bus route, and we worked that bus route together. Then Brother Hand got me my start in the ministry. I was 14 years old. He came to me and he said, Jerry, how would you like to work for the church? Our chief bus mechanic back then was my bus driver, and he saw how I had the bus route organized and all that thing. And so Brother Hand said, I would like you to gas the 80 buses that our church owns. And that was my job, first job at this church. The buses were all parked on an empty lot on Summer Street, just east of Indianapolis Boulevard, and it took me all day to gas those 80 buses, and that was my very first job at this church in 1968. Got time to go off to college. There was no Hyles-Anderson College, and so I went off to Bible college at Brother Hyles' recommendation. But there was about 12 of us that went that school that year, and we knew the college here was starting, so we filled out application forms, and I sent mine in, and they sent me my acceptance letter. And it was a form letter. It said, "Welcome to the new college. We're excited about the college starting up." And at the bottom it says, "P.S. You have been selected to be the first student accepted at Hyles-Anderson College." And so came back to Hyles-Anderson and met my wife, of course, through the church here. And we were going to get married right after we graduated from high school, or college rather. And so Brother Hyles called us in the office prior to that. They had just finished building the Jack Hyles Auditorium to the size that it is now. And they were getting ready to have pastor school. And Brother Hyles came to us. He says, "Hey, you guys are getting married in June." He said, "Would you mind moving your wedding up to March and get married at pastor school?" Back in the 70s, Brother Hyles would do a wedding every other year in pastor school. And so he said, "Jerry, you're a bus kid, and Gail, your father's the vice chairman of the deacon board." He said, "This would make a great wedding for pastor school." So as nervous as you are at your own wedding anyway, we were there in that building with 5,000 people on a Tuesday night of pastor school in 1975. And we got married. And then I started working at Hammond Baptist High School. I worked there for 3 years. We had 4 school buses that went around picking up children and bringing them to school. I maintained those buses and took care of the buildings there. Then in 1979, the enrollment at the college started exploding. And Brother Hyles called me and said, "Jerry, I'm going to get rid of those yellow school buses. Would you mind transferring over to the college and be a staff member and work at Hyles-Anderson College?" I said, "Hey, you're the boss, whatever you want me to do." So in 1979, I started working at Hyles-Anderson College. So that's where I met Brother Wilkerson. He came as a student in 1985. And I used to drive all the long-distance trips for the church back in those days because I worked for a charter bus company in Chicago. And my boss would give us a motor coach. I drove Hammond Baptist High School senior trip for 15 years in a row, Hammond Baptist junior high school trip. And Brother Wilkerson would always win these bus ministry contests. And a lot of those contests were that they would have a trip. We went down to Texas to visit Brother Hyles' first church and where he was born and places like that. So I got to know Brother Wilkerson. I was a staff member and he was a student. Then in 1990, God led me to move to Louisiana. And at the time, I struggled with that thing. I thought, "Lord, why are you wanting me to leave this church? I love this church. I had been in the church almost 30 years at that point. I'd worked for the church for 22 years. My mother was a widow. My mother-in-law was a widow. And I said, why? And at that time, I didn't understand it, but I knew that's what God wanted me to do. So in 1990, I moved to Louisiana. The same month, Brother Wilkerson moved to Long Beach, California to teach in the Christian school. 3 years later, needed a school administrator in Louisiana, and Brother Wilkerson moved from Long Beach over to Louisiana, and through a series of circumstances, we ended up working in the same church together. We both taught adult Sunday school classes. Our rooms were right next door to each other. We would go soul winning together on Monday nights. Then he got called back to Long Beach, California to be the pastor. And he said, "You're going with me." And I said, "No, John, I don't want to go to California. It's too expensive to live there." But anyway, he would call me on the phone after so finally my wife and I said, "Let's go." So we sold our house in Louisiana, and I was privileged to be his assistant pastor in Long Beach, California for 12 years. Then 4 years ago, my wife died with breast cancer. Brother Wilkerson came to our home that morning. I had called all of my adult children into the home, told them that it was getting close to the time. Brother Wilkerson just happened to come by that morning, and he walked in the room, and my wife had been totally unresponsive that morning. And Brother Wilkerson started singing to her because he knew Gail loved music. She used to sing solos in this church. Had a beautiful voice. And while he was singing, she started tapping her foot. And after he sang 4 hymns to her, she breathed her last breath and went on to heaven. 60 days later, Brother Wilkerson gets called to be the pastor here at First Baptist Church. I mean, my life turned upside down during that time. And so, but Brother Wilkerson came to me. He says, "Brother Jerry, you've been with me all these years." He said, "The only reason you came to Long Beach is because of me." He says, "Come on back home." He said, "Come on back to the church where you got started." Well, I didn't want to leave here to begin with, but I see God's hand in it. I thank Jesus Christ for my salvation. I thank this church for the bus ministry and the investment, the fuel, and all the money it takes to run buses. And then I thank God for leading me. Had I not moved to Louisiana, and Brother Wilkerson, humanly speaking, I would have never been. And for the last 19 years, it's been my privilege to serve the Lord alongside Brother John Wilkerson. But it all started with the bus ministry. For a church people who have a heart to reach out to kids, and they're not going to pay the way for the bus ministry. We all know that. The bus ministry, it doesn't even come anywhere near financially to breaking even. But the investments in people's lives go on. Now for 48 years, I have been serving Christ in different churches, all because of the bus ministry. And I thank God for those people who reached out to me in my early years. I thank God for Brother Colston, who led my father to the Lord in a Veterans Hospital on Damon Avenue just before he died. Brother Vineyard, who was our bus director, led my mother to the Lord. Maxine Jeffries bought me my very first Bible as a bus kid. She would see me sitting in church struggling to find the scriptures. And Brother Colston back then used to read the scriptures, and he'd say, now if you have a Schofield Bible, turn to page such and such. Well, I didn't have a Schofield Bible. She went and bought me a leather, I was a bus kid. She went and bought me a leather Schofield Bible so I wouldn't be embarrassed not being able to find the scripture reading in church. And I thank God for the people who have invested in me in this church. And thank you for continuing this legacy of supporting the bus ministry.